If you clicked on the thumbnail, chances are this is one of your absolute favorite aircraft. The F-4 Phantom is such a favorite of so many people. We've got the massive Skymaster F-4 Phantom here in the shop. This is a double boxer down there. We've got lots of parts to go in this plane, lots of cool stuff. Build video series begins now. All right, guys, we have built a few F-4 Phantoms on the channel. We've got the big Carf one coming, this awesome Skymaster one here, and love this plane. It's such a favorite. So really looking forward to this build and putting this thing together. First thing, like normal, we're gonna start off with our equipment that's going in the aircraft. So generally what we like to do here at the shop is lay all of the equipment out, show you guys exactly what we plan on putting in this aircraft, and that's what we're gonna do as a first step. So let's pull all that equipment out of those boxes and take a look. So we got our equipment laid out here on our table. So let's go over what we've got laid out here. Now, one of the cool things about this build series is the owner's located in Norway, and Frode is his name, and he sent me a whole bunch of stuff. So basically, we've got options in this case. So we've got a lot of equipment on this table that we probably won't use. He sent a lot of like nuts and bolts and power box wire and airlines and lots of different stuff. So really nice to have all those things available. Yeah, so thank you, Frode, for doing that. And let's take a look at what we've got laid out on the table. Now, one of the key things as well is we don't have any servos sitting on the table because this aircraft was ordered with the servos from Skymaster. So those servos are an MKS servo branded with Skymaster's name on them. They're already installed, but keep in mind that we run in every servo here in the shop. So all of those servos are gonna come out. They're all gonna get run or burnt in and then reinstalled and checked over before they go back into the aircraft. So that's an important thing. So starting off left to right, we'll just go over all of our equipment here. We've got a pair of Zykoi 195s going in the aircraft. Now, no options there. That's what's going in the aircraft. We've got a tank here from CM Jets. Now, we've got some different tank variations. Basically, we're putting smoke on this F-4. The F-4 looks really cool. The scale model has like black smoke trailing out of it, so 7 liters, which is huge. So what we may end up doing is using this as like our primary and figuring out what we're doing with the other tanks. So anyways, we've got options with the tank from CM Jets. We may pull all the fuel from this one and use the other tanks for smoke or whatever. We'll figure that out. We've got an afterburner set, which we've ordered, and this is the insanely bright afterburner set from Unilite, so I've ordered this specifically for this aircraft. Now, the one thing missing on the table is our Warbird pilots. We've reached out to Warbird pilots. They have a beautiful set of pilots with movable heads coming, an absolute beautiful piece of work. So when they do show up, depending on where we are in the build series, obviously we'll take a look at those as well. All right, so we've got some power box maxi wire. We've got some bus cable as well too from power box, some Robart restrictors, some smoke pump items here, power box connectors. So that's all of our power box stuff. V-speed compressor, we're definitely putting that in the aircraft. Now this is kind of where it gets into different options. So we've got an SBEC 30 that's here. I don't think we're going to use this for anything. We've got some different ways of setting some things up. We've got 2 different central boxes here as well. We've got an M-bar sensor, which we don't really need because we've got the Zykoi sequencer, so we'll see how those things work out. But we've got a central box 210 and a 400. The 400 should be perfect for this plane, so we'll probably end up using this guy, using some of the BEC outputs to power different things like the afterburner lights. That's one of the beautiful things about the central box 400. With the central box 400, of course, we're using a Cortex Pro. So those are all of our different options there. Getting back here, we've got some JMP UATs, some small ones. The small one would be good for the smoke system, big ones for the turbines. We've got some different options there. This is the Skymaster accessory kit, and then we've got the Skymaster included chute down here as well. Getting back to the jetty stuff, we've got 3 Rex 3s with 20mm dipole antennas, 20 centimeter dipole antennas. E-4 expander, we'll definitely end up using this. M-speed sensor, we'll definitely end up using that. Zykoy valves, this is the way I would prefer to go. So we've got a lot of different valves here, and we've got the Zykoy fail-safe sequencer. Zykoy screen, this is just an extra unit. Power box smoke pump here as well too, so we'll use that guy. And this is one of those things as well where you may power this also with the S-Spec output on the central box. So it can be a really simple setup on this aircraft. So generally, like the other Skymaster aircrafts that we've built in the past, an aircraft like this we would power with, I've got to look at my fingers, with 4 3-cell LiPo batteries. So they would all be the same battery, so it's ultra simple, very simple setup. You put all 4 batteries in the nose to power the turbines and the compressor, to power the main Central Box 400, and then everything else accessory-wise is powered from the BEC outputs on the Central Box 400. So very simple setup, very light. Obviously, the lighter the aircraft, the better it flies. The simpler it is, the less complications you'll have later on. So we've got some various Festo fittings and fillers right here. Got a box full of hardware there as well too. Jetty stuff here, we've got an MUI 50 and a 900 megahertz receiver. Now this gets into some of the questionable items, mainly this HSD Jets box. So this box here is one of the air control boxes. I'm not a huge fan of using these things, so chances are we're just going to keep this in the sealed box, and we'll end up going with separate valves and the Zykoy controller. That's my preferred method. And last thing here for equipment wise is the extendable nose. Now this came painted, this came from Matrix Machine. They make these extendable landing gear for various F-4s, but obviously this one's designed for this aircraft. So great to see that. We've actually had that sitting here for a long time. Then we've got a whole bunch of snakeskin and a whole bunch of 3mm Festo line. So lots of different options as far as equipment goes in this aircraft. We've also got some more things sitting in the box. We've got Loctites and various mounts and stuff. So thank you for all that. This is all of our extra items here as well too. So looking forward to this project. It's going to be tons of fun. This is always a little bit interesting. So when you build for somebody, you kind of get to know their methodologies and the way they like things done, the different equipment layouts and stuff. So this one's a little bit different because we've got so many options, and the owner basically kind of said, I'm excited to see what you're going to do with this aircraft. So I'm looking forward to it. One of the things that we kind of missed out on a little bit, we definitely missed out on Nez. Nez, are you coming to supervise? All right, so the cockpit, the canopy, sorry, is ordered just as a standard canopy setup. So I can't do that with one hand. But anyways, that's kind of a cool way to do it, nice and simple. I don't know if we could make this operational, so we'll have to take a look at it and see. The owner would like it to be operational, but the problem is you've got so many different cuts and stuff that come from the factory to make it operational. I don't know if I've got the ability to do all those cuts without it coming from the manufacturer. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll see what we can do. All right, so step number 1 in a project like this is to set up a new model on our radio and get all of our Jetty stuff updated. So because we've got options in this, we're just going to keep it simple to begin with. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to update our Central Box 400. We're going to update one of the R3 receivers, and that's what we're doing. So we're going to use that as our base to create our model and get things set up and go from there. And then as we add things to the system and get our layout done and things, then we will update things as we add them into the airplane. So let's get that new model created and get rocking and rolling. All right, so we've got our Central Box 400 set up. We've got our R3 receiver, Rex 3 receiver set up. So this is ready to go. A little tip here for you guys. So if you are a Jetty user, a lot of Jetty users don't use this little trick. Now this trick is brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. Now this is Trusty's cousin, new Trusty. Original Trusty's in my apron, not wearing my apron right now. All right, so when you're dealing with central boxes, you don't need to have your remote switch set up. Just use a bind plug. Any bind plug, right? This is all turned on right now. If we put the bind plug in the switch port, turns it off. Done. So we've got our basic model layout done here. I took my blank model, so I'll show you this, select model. Keep a blank model with a whole bunch of the preliminary stuff already set up on the radio. So we've got our blank model. We copied that to our port number 29, which is the model we're currently on. So we've gone through, set up our basic model here. We've got all of our different functions set up. So ailerons, elevator, rudder, throttle, air brake, flaps, gear, gyro sense, brake, nose wheel, afterburner lights, lights, smoke, nose extension, gear lights. Those are our basic functions. And here is our servo assignment. So when we're doing a model like this, incorporating a Cortex gyro, a couple of the key things is your gyroed devices need to be on your first 16 ports, basically. So when you're dealing with a Central Box 400 like this, they can go anywhere, but when you're dealing with like the 320 and the 220, you've got your red ports, right? So you just have to make sure you label things or assign things properly. But in this case, we've got all of our gyro items, which is our control surfaces and our nose wheel, all in those first ports. So it's important to get this stuff kind of laid out as best as possible initially, because when you start going in and adding sub-trims and different settings and everything on your surfaces, these don't transfer over if you make a change. So we've got our ailerons, our flaps, our elevators, those are all 2 servos each, our rudder and nose wheel, gear, brake, throttle 1, throttle 2, gyro sense, air brake, afterburner lights, gear lights, smoke, and nose extend. So we still have 5 open ports, which is awesome, but we're using a lot of the functionality of the Central Box. So because this plane came set up with the Skymaster MKS servos, again, we're going to be pulling all of those guys out. So I think what we're going to do is we are going to separate this fuselage. Now the fuselage separates into 3 pieces, right? So we've got piece number 1 being the back one, our center piece, which is the intakes up to this point right here, and then we've got the nose section. So I'm going to separate those fuselage pieces right now, and that is going to let us work on these individual items. Now I believe we're going to start at the back and we're going to work our way forward. Now there's a couple interesting things with this aircraft. Number 1, access hatch right here. So this opens up, but you really don't have any access to anything else other than what you may hide under the nose. Now this aircraft, like a few of the Skymaster scale ones, is designed for a Powerbox Royal, one of the old Royal units. So if you look here, the reason I know this is because it's got 2 wide fasteners and 2 narrow fasteners. That's the layout for the Powerbox Royals. And then you've got your Powerbox switch here as well too. So a couple options here. I guess we could put our central box right there. I never would. That's a terrible idea. I think it looks terrible, and I don't want to have all those wires and everything coming through there. I think that's not a great option. I would rather have the central box either mounted midsection here, like underneath the cockpit in this area, or underneath the nose section here as well too. So those are some of the exploratory items that we need to figure out where we're putting things. As you can see with this F-4, the wings join together and they create the center part of the fuselage. Now I didn't mention this as well too when we were looking at the equipment, but we do have a full Revic bag set here for all of our surfaces. So those have been sitting in there since we unboxed the aircraft, but we've got the Revic bag set. So the wings join together, create the center part of the fuselage. So if you look at this layout, you've only got access to internal stuff through the access hatch, through the nose cone, which is why we need to leave access to all of those items. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we've got extensions for all of our items coming to the nose section. So for example, all of our receivers, the EXT port, we will have an extension run from the EXT port forward. What's that for? Well, when the owners receive their planes, with the Skymaster planes, we've done a few of them like this, like the F-14, the SU, the F-16s. Basically, when they get their plane, they've got the program, but they need to be able to bind all the items. So they need to be able to put a bind plug into that EXT port, power the receiver, bind the receiver to the radio, the on-off receiver, everything. The other thing is for your Zykoy gear controller, as an example. If you want to do any programming, you need to have that extension accessible for the sequencer. So all those little things that are important, we're going to make sure we do. So one of the things I have been thinking about and pondering is shipping this aircraft. Now, that is, we want to make this as affordable and compact as possible, so we don't want to ship it as a complete aircraft. So, I've been thinking about this for a couple months, and I think the best way to do this is if we have the front section put together like this, basically ship the front part of the fuselage and a couple of the other little pieces in one box. That's going to be a fairly small box. That's one of the nice things about the F-4 is it's quite compact, right? So we can build a nice wooden crate that is very well sized for the front end. And it also minimizes the amount of connections. So if we did that, for example, on the front part of the aircraft, tons of connections. Back part of the aircraft, far less connections. And this back part comes apart really nicely. So we've got 4 carbon tubes plug into the receivers. Those have nice fixing bolts on them, so we can have a couple connectors located, let's say in the center here, because that's as far away from the pipes as possible, or up top, somewhere like that. And yeah, possibly up top. Anyways, we'll figure that part out, that's not important. So in the back here, we've got our 2 elevator servos, we've got our rudder servo, we've got some lighting controls back there as well too that come to right there. We're going to have our tail hook and things, some air connections for the chutes and stuff, but you know, maybe we've got 20 connections that go on 2 different connectors type of thing in the back here. So that's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. So then what we'll do most likely is have this back section with our horizontal stab removed, and that back section will get shipped with the wings and everything in another box, because the wings are very large, as you can see there. So if you made a nice crate for the wings and the back portion, that's probably going to be the best method to ship this aircraft. So that is just some of the stuff that I'm thinking about as I go through this project, and as we go through it, some of that that I just talked about will make sense why we're putting connectors in certain locations and why we're making things splittable on the fuselage. So we've got the back section removed. Let's get this over to the table and we will start removing our servos to get those things burned in. All right, so I know I forgot to set up the operational tail hook on the radio. That's going to be another channel as well too. Not sure how this is going to work. When I was down in Tucson, I took some pictures of the F-4 up close, so we'll be able to try and copy that as much as possible, but this tail hook really isn't conducive to making this operational, so I'll have to do some funky magic work there to make it happen. So getting the tail apart is pretty straightforward. The elevator servos, horizontal stab servos, those are held on with 3 big bolts. So once you undo those, this plate just pops out, so that works well. The plunger here assembly, that just has 2 screws that hold it in place, so that loosens this off. Still doesn't pass by the section here, so it needs to come off from the base, which is fine. We'll take that off. And then the horizontal stab mount, again 3 bolts there, and this will come out and give us access to the rudder servo. So we have to take all this stuff apart to, number 1, get access to the rudder servo, and then kind of work backwards from there. Now, if you're ordering one of these planes with the servos mounted, you need to take everything apart. You can see there, nice blind nut setup and everything, which is awesome, but do your due diligence, go through everything, Loctite everything, cycle your servos, burn in your servos. It's going to make your setup bomb-proof. So that's what we're doing next. We're going to get this all taken apart, and then we'll start working on our servo burn-ins. All right, we got the whole tail taken apart here. Now the rudder assembly is definitely a challenge. Part of the reason we want to take this apart is I want to change the fasteners from this style, which are fairly weak fasteners from Skymaster. Nothing against them, but these are not strong. So we're going to change those out for some black hex head fasteners and get that stuff switched. In taking this apart, damage the Sullivan clevises, so we'll get those switched out as well too, obviously, to new clevises. And we've got to get our servo arm Loctited. None of this is Loctited, so that's another important step as well too. So first step, rudder, and also what you want to do when you're at this point is fasten down your surface mounts like this. So you've got access to these Allen keys. You're always going to get about a turn out of them, fairly loose. I've never had a kit that these are perfectly tight. So anyways, got those fastened down. We'll do the front one when we get to that point, but that one is done as well. All right, so it's actually been a couple weeks since we have been working on the F-4. We're back at it now. Just cycling the tail servos here. So that's the rudder servo. So that's getting cycled right now with our jetty box. Covered this in so many different videos. We burn those servos in because we want to see failures during the burn-in process if they're going to fail. So that's the reason we do it. All of the servos we build here or use in builds at the shop always go through that burn-in cycle. So we're doing our tail surfaces. While I'm figuring out the tail surfaces, I'm also looking at the cone setup here. Now this is a very hefty front plate. What we will do is we'll end up using this area here for some various components. The way I want to lay this plane out is basically I want to have the electronics sitting in this area right here. All of our stuff to run the airplane at the beginning of the day and the end of the day is in the nose in this section. And then all of our in-between flight stuff is going to be in this section right here. As of right now, I think that's the plan. So the only thing that might change is if we want to leave this back hatch area open or have access to be able to see the turbines while they're starting. That might be a good idea. I'm gonna give that some more thought because otherwise, if you remember, you have zero access to anything here. So I don't think it would be a terrible idea to be able to look down in here and see your turbines doing their thing. So maybe we might have this hatch just be an access hatch, and in between flights, you're undoing the nose cone, which is just a quarter or a keyhole turn, pops off. And then we've got all of our normal running components in this area. So air fill valve, EXT ports, fueling system, and everything accessible in this area. I think actually, you know what, that sounds like a better idea. What I was looking at here was battery layout. So we're going to do this aircraft with our standard setup for something like this. So it's going to be 4 3-cell batteries is what we're going to base it off of. So 4 3-cell lipos, just like this. So we can stick 4 of those batteries on the underside of this whole plate. We can have our plugins right there, and this will be for the wires and stuff to run through, and we'll have some of our starting equipment up here. So I think I'm just working on the plan. I think I've got a plan laid out. So anyways, still giving that some thought. But ultimately now, when we start running our servos forward in the aircraft, we know that we need to go from this point to here. We're going to split the fuselage at the back, so we're going to have a joint right here, and then the rest of those wires are going to come from that point all the way to this spot right here is where we're going to lay all of our electronics, right underneath this rear cockpit area. All right, and this first video is just so much planning and figuring things out. So I flipped the fuselage over. I know we're jumping all over the place. Flipped the fuselage over and just wanted to see how our tank situation is going to end up. So this is our center stock tank, and we've got our 2 saddle tanks. Now you can see the size difference here between the stock tank and the CM Jets tank. So substantially different. This is probably a 2.5 liter tank or something like that, maybe 3 liters. The CM Jets tank is a 7 liter tank. So I'm not really sure how we're going to sort the tanks out yet. I think the idea of the CM Jets tank is you drop that tank in, you've got one tank for the aircraft, which would be fine. 7 liters is a lot of fuel. With 195s, it's a little close, so I'd like to use the saddles if possible. Now, what I was thinking about doing is using one saddle for fuel and another saddle for smoke. We want to put smoke on this thing just to have that light black trail coming out of the back of the aircraft. Very cool effect. Now, the downside to wanting to do that is the CM Jets tank's a little bit longer, which is fine, but it's deeper, which is the struggle. So you have to get that brace out of there, but just to show you here. So if we pop this tank into place, the saddles are no longer a drop in because there's a little bit of interference there, but it's not 100% right now because the front part of this tank's not tucked in. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to remove that brace, see how the CM Jets tank fits in there, and we may have to do a slight adjustment on these guys. There is a bit of room in here, so if we run those up tight, we do have about 1/2 inch. So the underside of the wing tucks in right here, so we've got a little bit of space, I think, to be able to slide those tanks down. So they might just fit. I'm really hoping they do. It'd be great if they fit in that stock spot once the front part of that tank fits in, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So we have to play around with that a little bit and obviously have to get rid of that brace. All right, so now with our servos burnt in and tested, we can hook our servo up to our central box, get our servo arm Loctited and centered in place. So I just started my radio here, taking a look at things. So rudder is port number 7, so we can plug our servo into port number 7 and confirm that it's doing its thing. So there we go, we're about as centered as we can get. So now we can take our screws out, Loctite this stuff. That is so important, guys. Always make sure you Loctite everything. So now we'll do our 2 pinch screws and our front face. All right, so we've installed our rudder servo back in its spot. We've bundled up our servo wire, so just the tail end of it's coming through. And as we put these screws back in, we're putting a drop of thin CA into each hole. That hardens the wood and also locks down the screw. And here's a shot of the hardware switched out on one side. So we just went with an M2 hex head or Allen head bolt. Just went with one that's too long, so we know we have a decent amount of length there, and I'll just chop that off with side cutters. And this is what the other one looked like. The nut, of course, is missing on that side. But yeah, so we're switching those guys out, and then we'll be ready to put our rudder linkage back together, and we need to replace our 440 golden clevises as well. All right, so putting the rudder together here, we know that our servo, because we plugged it into the central box, is pretty much parallel. Our rudder, of course, is going to be pretty much parallel to the flat spot there on the arm. So these sides are already done up. This side here is just sitting on the underside of the servo arm, and I'm just getting the pins lined up in the holes, which they are right now, and that should be wonderful. So that is very well adjusted. We can add, you know, a couple points of sub trim, whatever we need to get that nice and straight, but that is basically exactly what we're looking for. And now we can also take it one step further here, and we've got one of our shop extensions plugged into our rudder surface port, and now we can see exactly how off we are. So we're a couple degrees off there, so let's go into our sub trim and see how much we need to add. So to straighten that out, we need about 7%, which is acceptable. Now we may have some variations in the rudder itself, so maybe what I'll do then is, flip this over. We'll undo one side 1 turn, do up the other side 1 turn, and we'll get that nice and straight from a mechanical setup. All right, and rudder surface is complete. We've got our keepers on there. I also don't like to use the little lock nut things there, so I actually put a drop of thin CA on the clevises right at the base there where it threads into the rod, and that locks everything in place. So that's a great system, nice and strong, everything's Loctited, everything's CA'd, that's great. So what we'll do now before we cover this guy up is we're going to make our extension up here. So I've cut my power box wire. Our rudder is going forward and our 2 elevator servos are right there. And I believe our wire connector is going to be up top here, so it's out of the way of the pipes and everything, and it's nice and high compared to anything that is going to be heat related down here at the bottom. All right, so we hooked up our servo lead here for the rudder, ran that one forward, and also took our 2 elevator connectors, did the wiring up. Those are going to be run forward as well. Put them in one of our little 3D holders here and glued those to the fuselage. Now what we're going to do is we are going to have this installed there. We're going to spiral our servo leads and plug those guys into that spot right there is the plan. But that, guys, brings us to the end of video number 1 in the build series of the Skymaster large F-4 aircraft. So we've made some great progress so far on this aircraft. I think we pretty much have our plan in place. I like to have that plan in place early. It makes me feel like I can move forward with confidence, knowing where the final destination is. We have some things to figure out here with the tank, obviously, but I think we're doing pretty good for progress. So, a couple things for you. Don't forget to check out the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. The After Dark is a completely separate channel. We do live streams here from the shop, and the coolest thing about the live streams is you get to see stuff well before it comes out on this channel, and you also get to interact with us. So if you're on during the live stream, we can chat back and forth, answer your questions. It's a blast. I love it. And the other thing is channel membership. So channel members right now, they are seeing the BDX first flights, the Lancer first flights, the Venom F-16 first flights, F-18 first flights. I mean, there's 4 or 5 videos right now sitting in the members only section waiting to be released on YouTube. So there's some links down below to members or how to become a member. It is a paid thing, but the perk with it is you get to see the videos as soon as I upload them to YouTube. And often we are very far ahead on videos. So thanks guys so much for watching. Thanks for tuning into this build series, and we will see you in the next video.